Hello, and welcome to the Bite-Sized Theology Podcast, Extended Edition, Episode 36, coming to you from three fellas who would be the mayonnaise on a poop sandwich.
Is that a compliment?
No.
I mean, it's not the worst part of the sandwich.
Oh, it definitely is. There's no question about it. You know how I feel about mayonnaise.
About that. So.
No, you're wrong. You're wrong. Joining me this week, it's Thursday, the 9th of July. I'm your host, Aaron Lively. Joining me this week is Sage Blaylock.
Hello.
And John McCord.
If you had in front of you those two options of poop and mayonnaise, and were told to eat one, it's a clear choice.
It depends.
What? What?
I don't know. What was eaten? What was eaten beforehand?
Oh, God.
This is a good opener.
Yeah,
we're going to scare away our entire audience.
This is not how I imagined this starting.
That's right. This is how you rack up our numbers. We just talk about poop.
Oh,
yeah.
Jeez.
Yeah.
We're going to have
Welcome
so many
to a
gross
very
tags in our YouTube video.
Welcome to a very intelligent podcast about theology.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. Why kid anybody? We all know what this is. So, how's everybody doing? John, you recently moved. How's the move in life?
I am in my apartment, no longer podcasting like a hobo. So that's nice. It's a nice place. My wife loves it and my dog loves it. So, 2 for 2 on the importance scale.
That's great.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's nice. I'm your next door neighbor, and I've already borrowed like 40 things from you. So get ready for that relationship.
Just a laundry cart so far.
I'm
sure it'll rack up.
Yes, that's right. Well, soon you're just going to come home, and I'm going to have like eaten all the food out of your fridge.
That's right. Sitting there impatiently on my couch.
That's right.
Waiting for me to get back. Yeah.
Aaron, why didn't you buy like more Lay's chips?
Where were you?
I was worried sick.
That's right.
That's right.
Well, Sage is not here. He's off doing this. He went to check on rice, I believe.
Who has a timer on rice? Really?
I don't know. Honestly, just get a rice cooker so it'll figure itself out.
That's right. Or just eat it raw like a real man.
Yeah, I don't get it. Sage,
defend yourself.
Defend yourself.
Well, so a long time ago, I had so my first experience with macaroni was, in fact, eating a piece of dry, uncooked macaroni out of a box because I thought that's what people were eating because I didn't understand how cooking worked. So it was really bad. It was really bad. And now I refuse to eat things that are raw. It took me till I was about 24 years old, I think, before I tried sushi for the first time.
Wow.
So
what'd you think?
Well, I mean, I like sushi. It depends. I like crab-based sushis. I like shrimp. I can do some salmon, occasionally tuna, but I don't have a very broad base when it comes to different types of sushis. Like Jamie likes eel roll. No, I'm good. I'm not going to do that. It's just not going to happen.
I'll probably try any sushi you put in front of me.
Yeah.
Even poop mayonnaise.
Oh, we got back to it.
All right.
Yeah.
There we go. All right. Sage, you just recently didn't move. What's it like staying in the same place?
It's very similar to how it was before. You could argue there is no before. It just is. So it's pretty much the same as it was.
Spoken like a true philosophy major.
Thank you.
Oh, my gosh. Well, here we are, everybody. Have we got a show for you today? This is actually the second part of a thing we didn't expect to be 2 parts, but here we are with the second one. Before we get started, so hard transition here. There's obviously like a lot going on in the world right now. There's brokenness and pain in the Black community. There's coronavirus, obviously, which shows no signs of stopping in the States. That's not even getting into any of the personal stuff you listening to this might be dealing with. So on a serious note, hopefully you all probably have communities, mentors, etc., who can do this for you. So if that's the case, definitely lean into them too. But if you have anything that you're struggling with and you just need us to be praying for you, like you can write us with the contact form on our website, and we'd be honored to hear from you. We'll also just pray for you and just know we're doing that. We don't have to share, obviously, anything you share with us. We'll just be praying. So just figured I'd extend that. Before we get started too, if you've been listening to us for a while and you enjoy this, which I don't know why you would based on the opener we had in this episode, but if you do enjoy us at all, feel free to write us a review. It can be honest. I think we prefer honesty, but also like if it's leaning in the 5-star direction, we strongly encourage that kind of feedback. However, be honest. If you hate this, it's fine. You're probably not the only one on planet Earth who does. So please feel free to write us a review. It just helps, keep us honest. Most importantly, it helps other people discover the podcast. So please, if this podcast has helped you at all or made you laugh or cringe or cry in a bad way, like not healthy tears, like more like we talked about what we did at the beginning of this podcast kind of tears, like why am I listening to this and wasting my time kind of tears. So feel free to write us. Feel free to write us a review on your podcast app of choice. So we're going to get started. We're going to jump right into our opening segment, which this week is Elimination Round.
Sage, do a theme song. Perfect.
All right. That's good.
Yeah, that'll work.
We'll
fix it in post.
Yeah. So today's topic is beverages. So for those of you who don't know how Elimination Round works, it's basically, it's very simple. We have a list. This week it's a list of 10 items. And each of us we will go around in a circle or in a linear fashion as we are on a Zoom call right now. So we'll just be using our best judgment there.
It's like a snake draft.
Are we going linear or counter linear? Have we decided?
Still going to think about that.
Okay.
Time is a flat circle, my friend.
That's right. It doesn't matter. Does it really matter? I don't know. So we're basically eliminating every single one of these things from existence except for one thing. So who knows what it's going to be? I have 10 beverages on this list. You will no longer have access to any of these beverages except for one of them by the time we're done with them. Another rule is that we all get one shield. So if at any point somebody is like, cross that off the list, we can jump in, throw a shield in the mix, and it'll last until whoever comes next and also deletes it from existence. So here we go. Our 10 beverage items that we will be working with today. 10. Water, soda, beer, tea, coffee, juice, wine, liquor, sparkling water, and milk. There we go.
Couple clarifying questions. Can we make a general rule that when we say we're getting rid of water, we're talking about just like drinking water for us in our own lives and not like H2O across the planet,
the
which
entire
would be
board.
a catastrophe.
Yeah, I suppose that's fair.
Because that really takes the favorite out.
I suppose, yeah. Okay. That's a reasonable request.
Okay.
All right.
I will start.
Good.
I don't care if that was planned.
Counterlinear or linear.
I am the captain.
Counterlinear it is.
Yeah, counterlinear it is.
I will take away sparkling water.
Yes.
Shield.
Whoa. Shield coming out.
Look.
Early.
Yes, you got that right. So, controversial opinion here. Even if we were talking about water versus sparkling water in the sense of, are all of our oceans getting replaced with it? Are all of our lakes getting replaced with sparkling water? I would counter that even that is for the betterment of society. If everything were sparkling water that is currently water, we'd be way better off. Imagine how good – I fantasize every day about swimming in a pool of sparkling water. Imagine the bubbles drifting up your body.
You can drink too much sparkling water and it will like seriously mess you up and like I don't think it'll kill you, but it'll come close. It's like your entire being starts to be carbonated, which is really bad for you.
Well, that's how water works too, because you drink too much of that, you're also dead. You could apply that to anything on this list.
That's a good point.
That's
It's
fair enough.
Yeah. It's hard to argue with that.
Yeah. So, I would say, generally speaking, if you turn on a faucet, sparkling water should come out. You can choose the flavoring. Do you want lime? Do you want plain? I don't know. You could flavor it like anything you want. We could cross everything else off this list and you could flavor sparkling water sort of like that. Like, oh, orange juice is gone.
Listen,
whatever.
You can stop. You could stop defending it. It's going to get taken off. Like,
Very soon.
Very soon.
Very
All right.
soon.
But
well, I just want the drama.
Okay.
Okay.
So let's go. I don't know who's next. We all have different Zoom calls.
The counter linear would be to Aaron next
Okay.
because I am in the middle between
See,
the two.
we're
of you.
all in the middle in the Zoom call, though, Sage. Like, it doesn't
well,
matter.
mine's vertical, okay?
Yes, sir.
Yeah,
Mine is
we're
too.
all of ours. This is how Zoom works.
I don't know what you're talking. Mine is vertical. I had mine snapped to one side of the screen where John is on top, then me, then Aaron.
Yeah, everybody's in the. Okay, Sage, you go.
No. I'm
Aaron
going.
goes.
I think
Oh,
Aaron
Aaron
should
goes.
Aaron
Okay.
should go.
I'm taking water off the list.
Shield.
Whoa! Another shield comes out early.
All right. Fair enough. Explain, Sage.
I'm going to explain by going to my turn and getting rid of sparkling water. I think our cultural fascination with sparkling water, to me, is absolutely disgusting. We are so dissatisfied with everything that we have in our lives. And, you know, there are all sorts of economic and cultural reasons why this is the case, why there's a slow decay of our values and meaning in society. And I think sparkling water is us looking at water, the thing that's kept all of us alive from the very beginning. And we're saying, you're not good enough for us. And I think that's disgusting. I think we're being selfish. We're looking at one of maybe the most important elements in creation and saying, you're just not good enough for me. And I'm not okay with that. And sparkling water is now gone and water is still here.
I think that you can take the resources in creation and steward them really well by turning water into sparkling water and solving all of the world's problems.
That's dominion theology. That's what dominion theology looks like. That is not stewardship. Stewardship would be not throwing plastic bottles into the pond. Dominion, which is where we're just destroying the whole world to fuel this capitalist destructive force of humanity, that's sparkling. That's what you're doing.
I think you're acting as
you're in this for big sparkling water. That's what this is all about.
Yeah. You're acting like this sparkling water thing is like a Tower of Babel situation where we're
is.
asserting our own creative abilities over God's. But you know what? I would say the opposite. I say this is stewardship. And you can't find a line between the two. What is it? What is it?
So what you're telling me is that by building this giant tower up towards the heavens, you're actually honoring God and showing the creative power of human beings. Is that what you're saying?
I'm talking about sparkling water. I'm not talking about a tower. I'm talking about love and life and general, well-meaning good intentions with all of your neighbors.
It's called an analogy, Aaron. Read a book.
Aaron went full Colorado there.
Yes,
Colorado. Defending sparkling water starts talking about love and life and loving our neighbors.
That's right. No other piece of me is left anymore.
Yeah.
This is it.
Well, see, I don't know. I really, for comedic purposes, want to take water off, but I'm still deciding. I'm still deciding between it and my other final choice because I don't know. Water, you need it to exercise, right? Like you can't work out if you don't have water to drink.
Yeah.
Because you have Gatorade, you're fine.
Yeah, that white wine's not going to go down well right after a long run, I would imagine.
Yeah, but I don't know. I'm gonna take off milk then. Like I feel bad for any babies because that's important for growth. But I'm 26 and now science is starting to show that it's probably bad for adults. So
yeah.
I'll take I'll take milk off the list and pass the ball to Aaron.
Wow. All right. Fair enough.
So milk and
gone.
sparkling water's gone. We still have water, soda, beer, tea, coffee, juice, wine, and liquor.
Okay.
Also, side note, where does cider fall on the list? Would it be juice or beer?
It's definitely not beer.
Okay, sounds good. Perfect.
Falls in the juice category.
Yeah.
I don't know. You know, I want to destroy water so badly. I really do. But I think I'm going to save it for a little longer. I'm going to take soda off the list.
Yeah.
Definitely.
I mean, normally I would say you could get the bubbles from sparkling water if you really care about it that much, but now I guess you can't. So just screw everybody, I guess. Soda's gone.
All right. Sage, what about you?
Okay. So there are two different routes I could go here, both of which I do not ever take part in. So I'm gonna take coffee. Get rid of coffee.
That's really
sorry.
sad.
It's terrible for you. We've developed a chemical.
For you.
John.
It's not bad for you.
John.
In all of the blue zones, the places where people live the most, they drink coffee. Good coffee. Not this capitalistic big American coffee that you're going to try to accuse me of. I'm talking about we just went and picked it and put it in a pot, and it's amazing. Costa Rica ruined me forever on coffee, just so we're all clear. If it's not motor oil, if I can't take my Yeti and pour it into my vehicle and drive to work, then it's not coffee. But
the way I look at it, so if you need coffee, you need more sleep. So go to bed earlier. Set an alarm for the appropriate time.
We live in a society that doesn't allow that, Sage.
It's
all about productivity.
Here's the thing.
I am a healthcare worker in the midst of a global pandemic. So you want to tell me that I need to sleep more?
How optimistic of you.
Okay, John, if I'm your doctor and I prescribed you more sleep, how would you feel?
I'd feel insulted.
I feel chastised.
I would feel insulted. You wouldn't
chastised.
No, because I'd be like, hey, doctor, you know why I have insurance to pay you what you need? Because I have a job that demands I never sleep. So, boom.
Here's the thing. Here's the thing, and I'll leave it at this. If we get rid of coffee, then our entire culture of working, which has millions of people overworked, underpaid also, but overworked to the point where they have to drink coffee because they only get to sleep 4 hours before they have to go work at their second or third or fourth job. We get rid of coffee, that culture has to change.
I don't agree. That's very optimistic picture of society you've got there.
It has to change because people will die.
I feel like we'll just turn to cocaine.
Well, that's not on the list.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm gonna let you take it off, mainly because this is making me confront I drink 3 beverages that I don't want to reveal because I don't want y'all to start targeting them and making me lose my shield. But so this is making me confront my top 3, and coffee, it can go.
All right. Coffee's off. So we are now left with water, beer, tea, juice, wine, and liquor. All right.
I will get rid of wine to avoid ticking anybody off, because everything else will make somebody mad, I feel like. So
what about communion, John? That's what this whole episode's about.
I mean, I was raised Methodist, so just get some Welchers, son.
Exactly.
Don't you know that Noah planted an unfermented garden and he just happened to accidentally stumble upon, and that when Jesus turned water into wine in Cana, even though everybody was drunk and the wine and the wedding coordinator was like, this is really good wine. Really what the Bible means there is that it wasn't wine.
It was grape Kool-Aid.
It was grape Kool-Aid because that's good hermeneutics.
Yes.
That's right. Yeah. It had, Kool-Aid's been around for much longer than we thought.
That's right. Actually,
Also-
Jesus' first recorded words were, "Oh yeah."
Oh man, pretty good. All right, well, wine's off the list. Way to go, communion fans.
Goodbye, red wine.
Yeah, it's over.
Goodbye, red wine.
So our beverages remaining: water, beer, tea, juice, and liquor. I'm taking water off. It's been around
Right.
for too long. It's just boring. There's no pizzazz. There's
It's
nothing
stagnant.
in it. It's very stagnant. It's stagnant. It has no bubbles. It's worthless.
So like,
So I'm taking it off.
but like Gatorade still exists, Propel still exists, like
Oh,
Yeah.
Propel.
Oh, yeah.
sports
That's
drinks
fine.
that you can drink to replenish after workouts still exist. Okay, I'm good. Take it.
Yep. All right, it's off. Beer, tea, juice, and liquor. Those are the four beverages we're left with.
Juice and liquor.
This is the world we created. All right. You're next, Sage.
Well, people are about to learn a lot about us. I'm getting rid of tea.
Yep.
Get out of
Okay.
here.
All right.
I think people can relax better if they don't have coffee destroying their central nervous system, so they don't need tea.
All right. No
All right.
argument there.
Here we go.
Beer, juice, liquor. Here it
Beer, juice, liquor. I'm getting rid of juice. I'm sorry, Sage. I'm sorry to do that to your ciders, man.
Oh, yeah. Well,
I don't know if I can ever forgive you,
Yeah.
but I
Honestly,
drink
I
almost
think-
exclusively water, so
I've
I've already died here. So in this world, I already don't exist anymore, so it's not going to be a huge
right.
deal
But
to the
it
dead
is
me that
my-
cider doesn't exist.
It is my goal to get you to like the classiest form of yourself, because like you are a cool person to talk to about philosophy and history and all that, and it just doesn't work when you're drinking an Angry Orchard being like, let me tell you about this really cool, 4th century philosopher that affects the way we think today. That conversation, like, I can't get over the fact that you're drinking worse grape juice or worse apple juice. And like, it hurts me as your friend. And so I'm doing this for your own good so that you'll have to, like, we can give you like some watered down liquor and
there's no water left in this world, John.
oh yeah.
Yeah, what are we
It's
gonna?
over.
Okay.
We just gonna
Never
use
mind.
beer to water down our liquor.
Yeah, we use beer to water down our liquor. It'll still be good for you. It'll still
Yeah,
my argument
I
still
got you.
stands.
Oh,
So would Stella? Where does Stella Artois
That's a
European
beer.
style cider?
That's
Okay,
a beer.
okay, all right. I'm good.
Anything like
I'm good.
Stella, yeah, that's still a
Yeah.
beer.
Okay, we're good. Goodbye,
All right.
Bold Rock cider.
You do have to like peel off like gold confetti
Yes.
to get to it. So it's not
Yeah.
much of one, but it is one.
Okay, at least for one more turn, I still have a cider.
Okay. Aaron,
Still have it.
this is a big turn.
This is a tough one. Beer and liquor both good. Liquor I like in mixed drinks. I like mixing drinks. Enjoy it. Beer is pretty delightful as well. So I guess my problem is we've now created a world where there's no sparkling water, there's no water, which makes creating ice awfully difficult unless you like put a beer in the freezer and let it explode and then just pick up the fragments. You
could always just
drop
put
that
a-
into.
You could put a metal cup in the freezer, get it cold, and then drink your beer out of that.
Well,
I suppose,
but there are also like the whiskey stones, right? That are just like they get cold, but they're not ice that you can put in drinks to like straight liquor to cool it down without watering it down.
That's true. My problem is there's no juice also, so that makes mixing drinks very difficult.
I
Now you're just
don't-
mixing beer and liquor together.
Don't
to
like
make
where this is going. I
Like-
still have my shield, but I know which way Sage is going to vote, so I need to swing you. Okay.
Yeah. All right.
Liquor.
Well.
Here's the thing for liquor, right?
Okay. Yep.
For 26 years of my life, I would have chosen beer over liquor. Okay,
Mhm.
I would have done it. Yes, I started drinking in embryo. So if you're doing math,
God.
like I would have chosen beer over liquor. However, almost the day of my 26th birthday, beer started messing up my stomach. I couldn't drink even the littlest of beer without waking up in the middle of the night with a terrible stomach ache. So what I'm saying to you, Aaron, is it will come for you too. And as a runner, as you are,
Yeah.
one day you will have to make the decision to switch to clear liquor to be able to run the distances that you want to run. Because if you drink a beer, then you try to run 12 miles, your stomach will explode. But if you drink
it's a much worse running material. You're right.
Exactly. But if you drink liquor, then it's better for the caloric count. It's better for the next day, and you can run as far as you are. Now, you do have to relearn how to drink, right? Because you can't drink it like a beer, because then you'll be an alcoholic and you'll, go against the Bible. But if we could all just learn together, how to, sip, it'll be okay. So
drinking any kind of liquid is I guess my complaint is drinking any kind of water, juice, whatever. It's a nice sensation. But if we go liquor, you're only drinking that much at a time. I guess it's more efficient.
Budget. Think of your budget.
But do you want to think about your budget when you're just trying to have a good time?
Think about the environment, Mr. Dominion Theology.
Oh, yeah.
It all comes down to you, Aaron.
It does. This is a hard choice.
What would your Colorado friends want, Aaron?
It's very hard to say, actually. Very, very hard to say. I'm taking beer off the list.
Yes.
I'm doing it. It's just, yeah. Yeah. I don't know.
Quit the podcast.
Let me just say, we are a Christian theology podcast, and our only liquid left in the world we've created is liquor.
Sage is still gone, by the way.
Yep, that's pretty good. Oh my gosh. All right. Well, sorry that had to happen, everyone. But here we are. Oh, here he comes. Hey, welcome back, Sage.
Hey guys.
All right. That was elimination round. Everyone feel good?
Yes. Yeah. Nihilism, right, Sage?
Funniest
Nihilism,
delivery.
John.
We're now moving into our main topic, which is, what is the point of communion? So, we started talking about baptism in the last episode. Just talking about what is the point of it? What are some common misconceptions? What are some also debates that go on in the church about it? And so we're sort of structuring this in a similar way, because it seems baptism and communion are sort of these are two liturgical things sacraments we participate in as just being a part of a church body. And so it's good to talk about those and talk about what they mean, because I think it's easy when you're first introduced to them to sort of be well, okay, what's the point of this? And all of this stuff carries a lot of deep meaning. And so, yeah, I kind of want to just dive into that and figure out first of all, what are our experiences having been exposed to it over time? And also, has our opinion on it changed? How have we come to understand communion more fully as time has gone on? So first thing I guess I would ask, and you guys are welcome to throw in questions as you think of them as well. First of all, what was your experience of communion like growing up? How often did you do it? What was some of the early stuff that you always thought about it?
So I grew up in the Southern Baptist Church. So the view there is, and you will get into more of this. So there's a physical or a spiritual component in whichever different denominations to communion. There isn't really that in the Baptist realm. It's more of it's a symbolic thing. So Jesus isn't necessarily spiritually or physically present in that happening. It is done in remembrance of Jesus. So that's kind of the theology behind it, at least, how I grew up with it. And then in terms of when we did it, not very often. I would say maybe a couple of times a year. Like legitimately, I think it was once a quarter, possibly, if I have that right. And then, of course, in college and after that, uh, we went to a church that did it every Sunday. Every single Sunday we did it because we wanted to do the remembering every single Sunday. And in the church that I went to in college, there wasn't really any explicit theology of what it meant other than remembrance. So my entire connection with communion has been this is symbolic remembrance of what Jesus did for us.
Yeah, the earliest memories I have of communion was in the Episcopal Church, because that's where I was as like a child and kind of grew up, which Episcopals don't believe in transubstantiation, but I had to just Google it to make sure, because it was
What is
like,
transubstantiation, just for anyone who,
transubstantiation is the belief that that communion, the literal bread and the literal wine transform into the literal body of Christ and the literal blood of Christ. Right? Am I misrepresenting that at all?
No,
that makes sense.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, there's a great joke in Malcolm in the Middle where the youngest son is raised Catholic, and he says, "So if we eat the body and blood of Christ, does that mean we're cannibals?" Like, it's a great joke. And like, I don't mean to make light of that. If I disagree with that view, and I think that we probably all disagree with that view. But it was a very holy experience in the Episcopal Church, a very religious experience, which I think is appropriate. But then I went from that into the Methodist denomination, which is like grape juice and some like gluten-free option, which was a big change. And to be honest, like, I'd never really understood communion. And even today, like, I'm still working on building a relationship with communion, if that makes sense, because like, I still have to, it takes a lot of effort for me to connect emotionally with communion. And it shouldn't be that way, I feel like. But it is, just being completely honest. Like, if we talk about the crucifixion, like, it's really easy for me to get to an emotional place because it's, I connect with that. I fully understand. Well, I don't fully understand, but I understand as much as I can understand about what that means. When we talk about baptism, it's the same way. Like, I get legitimately excited about baptism, but whenever I'm about to take communion, I have to like remind myself of why this is so important. I don't have that emotional connection with communion. And I want to, because it's a sacrament and it's so vital to church and what the church is. But if I'm being completely honest, it still takes a lot of effort for me to really connect to that. And I don't know why. I think maybe that switch between viewing it so high, being in a church as a kid that views it so highly, to being in a church that is more kind of loose with it isn't the right word, but it's not the same thing as going from a Methodist church communion, or going from an Episcopal church communion to a Methodist church communion is a staunch difference. And so I don't know if that makes any sense. That was my experience with it as a kid, and even my experience with it now, where I'm really excited for this conversation, because I hope that it kind of unlocks some stuff within my own self to really connect with communion more than I do. Because it, by far, out of all the sacraments, it's the one I connect with least, which is probably not good, because it's probably one of the most important ones.
Aaron, is this when we find out that you believe in transubstantiation?
Plot twist. No. No, I guess my experience, like, my experience with the communion was, I think it's a lot of, John, what you imply, which is basically like the meaning of it has been lost on me, like, for a long time. And it really wasn't until maybe like even the last couple of years where we're really sank in like the actual like meaning behind it and what the real what the significance of it is to at least my heart. Like, what does it say about who Jesus is that this is one of the ways that we remember him and one of the ways that we celebrate him? And never ever devoted any critical thinking to that, or never thought it through really. When I was like a kid growing up in church and like not wanting to be in church because my parents would drag me to church when I didn't want to go, it was just another thing that elongated the service. I was always like one of those, I mean, I was always like looking forward to the service ending just to get out and like be a kid and not worry about, like, I didn't understand a lot of the relevance of who Jesus was for a long time in my life. But like went to church and was exposed to it, and we would not take communion. There was a small Methodist church in Connecticut that I was in when I was growing up around late elementary school, early middle school, where, again, like Sunday school class full of me. And if it gives you an idea of the size of this church, it was like Sunday school class, me, my two younger brothers, and like two other kids who like lived in our neighborhood. And that was like pretty much it. And so had a lot of a hard time connecting to anything we were doing, but also communion was one of those things that just was sort of like, okay, well, we read the spiel, we read the Last Supper, and we like, talk about like Jesus breaking the bread at the table with his friends and everything, but like in a way that's very recited, in a way that's very liturgical. And so for me, like, there was always a distance between me and the liturgical aspect of it, where it's like, yes, this is being read, but I always had this like connection in my head where it's like, like, is this really necessary? Like, what actually is the meaning behind this? Why do we have to like recite it exactly the same every time? And like all that stuff. Like ways that we take communion kind of stood out to me. I like, there's like the, it's grape juice and like a wafer. Sometimes it's like you actually rip bread off and dip it in the cup sometimes. And like that stuff occasionally stood out to me, but it really wasn't until like I started sinking into the theology behind it and like what is a little more of like what the point is, and also the context of like what was actually going on at the Last Supper, like the night before, and like that's a lot of that unlocked a lot of the significance for me. But even then, I think there was still a lot of like, it's not clicking to me what actually the meaning of this is, and it's not like sinking into my heart as I like participate in it necessarily. There was something about, I guess I always had the concept of like, this is sustenance for me in my head, but like, again, didn't do a whole lot of like critical thinking about like what that actually meant. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sage, do you connect with communion in like that same emotional way as you do with the other sacraments? Because if not, we all need to have a separate conversation right now. But like, what would you say?
I don't know. I think I do more so now. So in college, like I said, we switched to an every Sunday taking of communion. And it's interesting because you could conceive of it as previously having done it, 3-4 times a year, it might seem like something that is more special. But I think the weekly doing of it and thinking about it and sitting with, like reading the text and then sitting with it. And I really liked Aaron's point about thinking about what was happening when Jesus said, "Do this in remembrance of me." And a couple of hours later, he was taken away to be killed. Mm-hmm. And he was to his closest friends in the world. He was saying, "Do this in remembrance of me. This is how you're going to remember me," because this was one of the last times they really had together, especially before everything gets a little crazy.
Yeah.
So so it's like to all of us to remember what Jesus has done to us, and then thinking of it, in a personal sense of like a guy talking to his friends, and their friendship is about to fundamentally change. And they've been together for, about 3 years or so at that point. And it's like, this is going to change and it's going to be very different. And you guys aren't going to be just kids anymore.
Yeah.
So I think there's sort of that part to it, but also just in a very literal sense, sitting with it, because previously it was just like pass it around the room, do the little wafer or the piece of bread and then do the wine, or not that mine was ever wine, always grape juice. Go Baptists. Let's go. But sitting with it and really meditating on it and sort of coming to that understanding of it, of just like, what does he mean by remember? And then there's also, when he passes the cup, there's this, he says, this is the blood of my new covenant. So, it's like, there's the remember aspect, and then it's sort of in a way that baptism is a public proclamation of your faith. Communion is that in a more private setting, I think. So within the construct of the church, because baptism can also occur outside. It would have occurred outside, obviously in the ancient church, but communion is a thing that you would do in a house church. So that's something you would do in the context of your actual church. So it's very much a much more private, intentionally communal activity. So it's something that definitely has meant more in churches and gatherings where I'm closer to the people around me. And I don't know if that's me connecting those two dots, on a deeper level and, subconsciously and not realizing it. But I think there's something behind that, of this is the private, intentional, communal aspect. This is the more private sacrament, as opposed to baptism, which is a much more public thing. Because you think the first baptisms we see in the New Testament are in the Jordan River. John the Baptist tells everybody to come be baptized, and there's, hundreds, thousands of people there. So over time, I have gotten to a point where it's much more of a personal thing that really, really connects with me, as opposed to when I grew up, when it absolutely wasn't.
It's funny that we're talking about this, because I actually am starting to remember a couple times where, like, I must have understood the significance of it to some extent, or at least understood that there was something like deeply personal and touching about it, because there were a couple times in my life where I think it was like probably like late high school, early college kind of thing, where there were a couple times where it was like, I just feel like I'm desperate and like I need to remember what matters. And so like I took communion a couple times just on my own. And it was weird, because like, even as I'm sitting here talking about it, it's like, it's easy for me to say like, oh, well, I didn't really understand the meaning of it. It's like, its real significance didn't really unfold to me until very recently. And I think that there's an extent to where that's true. But at the same time, like, there's part of me that did understand the weight of it almost, where it's like, I think I always had like God's sustenance was something that I had in mind, I think. And then also like God's provision. Like there's an extent to where it's like, well, like God satisfies hunger. But again, like never really followed that through to its natural endpoint, but just kind of had a very surface level understanding of what that meant. And also the communal aspect of it was something that I was still like figuring out at the time.
That's a really good point, because I think one thing that's an interesting thing to add to this conversation is we do communion more than any other sacrament. Like, and so there's a concept that is interesting, and I think it's true, which is spiritual habituation is what I like to call it, which is habituation is the psychological effect that your brain filters stuff out. So like when an air conditioning kicks on in the background of a class that you're in, you hear it when it kicks on, and then you hear it when it kicks off, but you don't hear it in between, because your brain just filters that out. And I think one thing that happens in our spiritual walk, especially in regards to the Holy Spirit and feeling kind of these life changes, is that we get used to feeling the Holy Spirit. We get used to feeling that God is there, which is why it's so devastating when he's not, because we're used to that, right? And so I think that could be an element of this, like not connecting as much with communion. But I don't like that I don't connect as much with communion, because especially in regards to the significance of communion, in regards to Passover, as well, where Passover and communion is one of the I think worst things we've lost in significance. One of the worst things that we've lost as we teach communion and as we teach in the modern day church, where we don't mention Passover quite nearly enough, especially because Jesus is eating the Passover meal with his disciples. And that significance of Passover cannot be overstated. And so, like, Sage, I want to kick it to you to describe kind of the historical significance of Passover throughout the Bible. And then I'm curious if you agree with me in that really lost significance of communion. But before we kind of have that debate, let me kick it to you to explain why Passover is so important throughout Scripture.
Yeah, I mean, so obviously the origin of Passover is in Exodus. So before before God through Moses leads the Israelites, well, they're not Israelites yet, the Hebrews out of Egypt, out of slavery, they have the Passover meal, which is unleavened bread. Each family raises up its own lamb and treats it as a member of the family, and then they kill the lamb. They eat the lamb, and then of course they put the blood on the doorpost so that the destroyer, which, is that an angel? Not exactly sure, probably an angel, sort of literally passes over them and goes on and destroys the firstborn of Egypt. And this is the final plague where, of course, they are then finally let go from Egypt. Of course, Pharaoh doesn't exactly give up. He gives it one more run. But I think the symbolism of it is very important. So I think obviously you have the Passover lamb, and we know from the New Testament that that's a shadow of Jesus, of him coming in the future, that he is the sacrifice that God uses to pass over us, that God himself becomes that Passover lamb for us.
Yeah, John the Baptist literally says, "Here comes the Lamb of God to take away the sin of the world."
Yeah, it's very similar to the idea of a scapegoat, which, is like the town symbolically puts their sins onto a goat and then casts it out from the city.
Right, which literally comes from Numbers.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like same idea there. So you could say that the idea of the scapegoat is another reminder of the Passover lamb. So you have that, of course. The unleavened bread, that's just symbolic of they're about to leave. They don't have time to let the bread rise. So they're eating hot tortillas, and then I think one thing that I've actually never really noticed until right now is Passover isn't a happy occurrence. It's not necessarily a joyful time, as this might be one of the reasons communion isn't as highly esteemed in some sections of the church, is because it's also not necessarily a joyful time. So of course we're thinking about what Jesus has done for us, and that's incredible, but also the original communion is happening, like I said, right before everything's about to change. Just like Passover, the first one happened right before everything is about to change. And the change is ultimately a good thing. So the Hebrews become the Israelites. The Hebrews escape slavery. God liberates them from slavery. Just like Jesus dies, is taken by the Romans, is killed and crucified and then buried, and that's a terrible thing. But what comes out of that, just as in the Old Testament, the Hebrews are going to have to run from the Egyptians and go into the wilderness. But ultimately, once they get out of the wilderness, is when Jesus comes out of the wilderness of death, we then experience salvation, a liberation of sorts. So I definitely do think, John, I like your point. Passover is something we don't pay enough attention to, and I don't know if that's because it's considered a Jewish high holiday, so historically that's something we want to distance ourselves from. I don't know exactly what's behind that. There could be all sorts of different answers to that. But I mean, just like so many different things in the Old Testament that we have just, I mean, pardon the pun, we've passed over so we can just focus on the New Testament. But we truly understand the greatness and the historical scope of God's redemptive plan when we consider that thousands of years before these events, they were foretold to us, they were foreshadowed, and we've missed them.
So once again, to put this in context, you have Jesus eating the Passover meal with his disciples, the Lamb of God who is about to be slain so that God's wrath can pass over us and we can be adopted into his family, right? And so like this idea of the Passover meal, especially as Sage put it, of eating right before everything's about to change. Like Judas is at the meal with the disciples. Judas leaves the Passover meal to go betray Jesus so that he can be, taken away and crucified. Like it is a huge, significant thing. And I don't know, I think for a lot of us, we don't really think of it that way, which makes me personally and spiritually very uncomfortable that I have to think about that before I can feel that. Like baptism, I don't have to think about it. Like there's death to life. It's amazing, and anytime, any of the sacraments that go along, especially when somebody is dying. I don't know what theology everybody holds on that. Like I don't have to think to feel that. But with communion, even though we describe all of this amazing thing, now I feel it. But if you put the bread and the wine in front of me, then I have to sit and be still for a while and think about it. And maybe that's not a bad thing, but it definitely makes me uncomfortable.
Yeah. Yeah, it is interesting that you mentioned that we do it the most often, and yet it's the one we just don't think about. It's like the part of a liturgy of a service more often than baptism ever is. So obviously there's an importance. There's an importance enough to do this more often. There's an importance enough to remember why we're here, why we're gathering, what we're doing all this for. And yet we don't think about it. We don't devote a lot of thought to it. So I guess my question then to you all is, so over the course of your lives, like I know that there's always that mental hurdle, it feels like, where like the bread and the cup are in front of you and you have to, it's not a mental hurdle. I think it's like you really do have to wrap your heart around what's going on in order to get a lot of meaning out of it. And I wish it weren't that way, but John, I feel like, cause again, like John, you were saying, like, I feel disturbed by that too, where it's like, this is something that should be very, very deep and meaningful. And it's very hard to get myself in the state where I can be really grateful for this. And so I guess how has your understanding of what communion is changed over the course of your life? And has the meaning of it sunk in more as you've gone in, and how has it done that?
Yeah, I mean, so for me, it's kind of in a couple stages. The first, as a kid, I didn't understand it. I mean, I was Episcopal, and so I was just, as a dumb little 12-year-old, I was like, oh, I get to drink wine. Like that was all it was to me. In the Methodist, when I was in high school, when I was in a Methodist church, I tried to connect with it, but really couldn't. I have a vivid memory before, we've talked about this before. Like, I don't know if I was saved. Like I had my first experience when I was a freshman in high school, and then didn't really start living for Christ until a junior in college, or after that. But I remember having an experience in college, like around my sophomore or junior year, where I was sitting and we had a service, and I was sitting kind of in this amphitheater, just kind of crying because we had just taken communion. It had meant a lot to me, but I knew I was going to forget. And I knew I was going to go back to the same way that I always was. And I didn't want to do that. But I knew that I was going to. And I ended up doing that. I ended up going right back to it, to not understanding and to not remembering all that Christ had done for me. Fast forward a little bit, and later in my life, I'm a pastor of a church, and I'm not allowed to give communion to my church. I'm not allowed to give communion to my congregation because I haven't earned the piece of paper that says I can. I can preach every Sunday. I can do funerals, but I can't baptize and I can't give communion. Which, I mean, part of me understands, but then part of me really doesn't, because I mean, you obviously, communion means a whole lot. Baptism means a whole lot, but so does a funeral, and so does preaching, 52 times a year.
Yeah.
And so I remember the last year that I was in full-time ministry, driving an hour and a half to have to go get somebody to bless the elements to take it back to my church so I could give pre-blessed elements to my church on an Easter service. And like, part of me doesn't like that, because part of me is very frustrated with the concept that, okay, so you think I can preach, but you don't think I can give communion. However, part of me really likes that, because not everybody, like, you have to understand how important communion is, right? But then I go back with the part that's like, so what? People have voodoo that can just like, you have to like be present in the thing, but I don't know. So I bounce in between that, where I really appreciate the significance of communion and I understand the significance of communion. I'm still working on that emotional connection, even still today, as I do the other sacraments. But that's kind of where I am on it. Like, I understand philosophically, conceptually, and emotionally how important communion is and how important it is in the story of Scripture. I still have a ways to go on it before, when we do communion in a service, I'm moved. And honestly, it's to tears is the way that I kind of, when I see somebody baptized, like, I have to fight back tears. When I see somebody kind of receive the last sacraments or even receive communion before they die, I'm moved to tears. When I'm in a Sunday service and, there's wafers and the grape juice in front of me, it's not the same, and it shouldn't be that way, but it is. So that's kind of where I am on the whole thing.
Yeah. So, like I said earlier, didn't take communion a lot growing up. We also did the wafers in the tiny little plastic cups. So it's not something we sort of stayed with very long, and by nature of how it was being served, it wasn't something I wanted to savor, and that seems kind of funny, but when I got into college, so two things I think brought me to a different sort of view of communion. The first one being that we did it every Sunday, so I had to think about it more, and I couldn't forget what I had learned about, communion and those sorts of things, because, 7 days ago we did this exact same thing. And the other one is actually kind of funny. So we went to baked bread. So this church did baked bread, which we then dipped in grape juice, occasionally wine, usually grape juice. And in a very funny way, it's that it tasted so good. I savored it, and I had to stay with it for longer. So I had to be there in the taking of communion. So that got me in a different, I don't know, headspace and heart space to just sit with it. Like, that night, I'm sure Peter and John and the whole group had to sit with it. It was passed around the room. It was very quiet. Judas knew what he was going to do. Jesus knew it was about to happen. I'd have to look at the text, but Jesus may or may not have just told them all that somebody's going to betray me. I don't know if anybody has that pulled up right offhand to be able to say. So it's heavy.
Yeah.
Whereas baptism, there's an experiential component to baptism that is just terrific and powerful. You can breathe, you're dunked in the water, you can't breathe, and then you come back up and you take that first breath. And it, like John said, symbolizes this death to life, this new life, this first breath post-baptism. Whereas there's not necessarily that sort of experience with communion. It's a heavier thing. There's not something you necessarily cheer about. You're remembering Jesus's death specifically, the blood that is shed, the body that is broken. So that's where I'm at now. So I think about that. I think about Jesus's actual death, Jesus being separated from God for us, Jesus being dead for, approximately, 3 days. So I think about all that. And it also makes me think that he chose that. He accepted that gladly. Although sweating blood, he ultimately gladly accepted it for me, for all of us. And it's a powerful, beautiful thing, but it's heavy. And maybe that's why it's not as lifted up, because we prefer the light and happy to the heavy. Maybe that's part of it. I don't know. Yeah. But as I've gotten older and thought about it more and more, I appreciate the heavy.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, Sage, because I think for me, my journey over time has been sort of like, as far as my understanding of communion goes, I feel like the intimacy of it is what's actually been the thing that I've learned the most about, and feel like that's actually like been something that I've been able to wrap my heart around more. Because there's always the remembrance part. There's always like, this is like what Jesus did for me. And that's pretty much the way I've always looked at it. Like, and it's like, I think it's like, it's easy to reduce, like, it's easy to focus on like just the remembrance part. For me, it always was. And that was the part that was like hard. Like it was always the part that, like, when you compare with like communion versus baptism or anything else, like it was always the thing that was like, it's on my mind, or like, I'm grateful for God's provision. I'm grateful for what Jesus has done. And it's about like his atonement and everything. And recently I feel like I've started to uncover like another dynamic of it, where it's like, this is a very deeply intimate thing that's happening here, because Jesus is like, there's the theology behind it. There's the Passover, and the fact that Jesus is saying, I am that sustenance. The fact that he's saying like, I am this bread, I am this wine, like whatever hunger you have, whatever it is that you're going through, whatever it is you put your value, your ultimate sense of worth in, you're going to try and fill your hunger or satisfy your hunger on any of that stuff. And it's going to seem really good. Like, it's going to seem great, but deeply satisfied. The way that Jesus compares himself to a loaf of bread and a glass of wine, there's something going on there that's deeply nourishing. Like, there's something going on there that's like, your hope was built to be in me. Like, every hunger that you have was meant to be satisfied in me. Like, I am here for you. And on top of that, you've also got the fact that he's sitting at a table with all of his friends, and we are all invited to that table. Mm-hmm. So it doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter what you've done. You show up and you are invited to take the bread, take the cup, and remember what Jesus did. And not just remember what Jesus did, but participate as a community around that table and laughing and having a good time. And, obviously this was not a good, positive, like this was not an ending that like was desirable. Like, the Last Supper was not something that was like, that preceded a moment of like pure joy. Like, there was a lot of hardship that came after that. But the fact that like Jesus's friends were around him, one of them was a betrayer, but he was still invited to that table. Like, I don't know, there's something about that. And there's something about the fact that everyone is welcome to come, and no pretenses, just find your satisfaction in Jesus, because that's what he was built for. Like, that's who he is, and he's there with you. I feel like that's the thing that's kind of blown my mind recently, is the idea that like, that for me, God with us is like a concept that's no more obvious than at the communion table. Like, that's something that started to sink in with me, at least in the last year or two. Because like before, just very much like only focusing on like, oh, well, like Jesus has done this for me. Like I need to use this moment and like just be thankful. And that all of that is very true. And like, it's also very important. And like, that is really like deep down, like that is a deep meaning behind it. But I think also like one of the things that's resonated with me is how much it's really touched my heart that Jesus invites me to the same table as him. And he's the one giving everything for me. And yeah, communion is something that actually I've flipped on very much over the course of my life. And like very begrudgingly did it when I was younger to get to the end of a church service. And I feel like now I have an appreciation for a new dynamic of it that I just hadn't thought about before, or hadn't at least like tried to wrap my heart around. And it's always like, in me, I'm like very, like I have all the, I don't know, like you got this from like my deconstruction episode and everything, but it was like, for me, I was very latched on to the arguments and the philosophy behind Christianity and the worldview that was Christianity. But in the last year, deconstruction included, it's about a person. It's about the God of the universe sitting across the table from you and like drinking wine and eating bread and breaking bread. And like, I don't know. It's about this, there's a presence there. And I think like, even though I have to get myself in the zone still, like, even though there's like bread and cup is sitting in front of me, like I am full of thoughts about like all the stuff that's going on in my own life and stuff that I need to work through circumstantially. And like, there's all this stuff that I have to like put aside and just try as hard as I can to just be present and to just experience that community and that sense that God is like wrapping his arms around you, that it's not just he's going off to do this and he went off and like he gave his life for me and rose from the dead for me. All of that very obviously incredible, but it's also he's with me. And yeah, that's the part that I think has blown my mind a little bit more.
Yeah, and one thing I think is like, that's such a great point. And really the last thing that I think we need to add to that is, at the table with Jesus was a betrayer and a denier. So in like, for everybody listening right here, and you know, we don't often do this, but like for everybody listening right now, if you feel like you have betrayed God, man, he's at the table with Judas. Like he still wants to be with you. And if you feel like you have denied God, he is at the table with Peter, and he still
doubted
wants,
God.
or doubted God.
Thomas.
He's there with Thomas, you know, and we could keep going on this list, right? Like the disciples show this group of hodgepodge, broken people that are with Christ at the table, invited to the table, eating with him, present with him right before he goes. Like he's invited all of us there, and he still invites all of us there. And I think all three of us are testimonies to the fact that this is deeper than a story or philosophy or an ethereal idea, right? We three come from it from very different perspectives, but with a lot of pain for each of us, who all have come to this idea of what it means to sit at the table with Christ. And that, I think, is the essence of communion, of understanding and trying to take a moment and be real with the presence of who God is, and that he still wants us here, and he still wants us in general. So I don't know, for the anybody listening to this pod, realize that Christ still legitimately wants you, even if, no matter what you think you've done. And again, like, I don't want to get too preachy or too altar call-y, but like, it's just true. Like, and communion reminds us of that.
Yeah. It's all this stuff that's like so like deeply meaningful, like the theological significance of the Passover meal being the meal that Jesus is seated at at the table with his disciples in. And then there's also like just the emotional significance of the fact that you've got a group of people who are not perfect by any stretch of the imagination. Someone who's about to betray Jesus to the authorities and have him killed. And yet even he is at the table with them. And so like, you're not excluded.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
and wanted.
And yeah, you're not unwanted. You're cherished, you know? And so, yeah, I think that's for me, like something that I think has been really sinking in, something I need to hear. And also it's kind of, I feel like I'm reaching the point where like, I look at all of the like relational, like answers Jesus is giving to logistical questions. Like, it's like all the time that like his disciples are like, oh, you're like going away and like preparing these rooms. Like, how do we get there? And Jesus is like, no, I'm the way, the truth, and the life. And it's like very deeply cutting through to the heart. And I think it's like, that's the stuff that affects me post deconstruction is like, no, Jesus like was very intentionally saying like, it's me, I'm with you, like over and over and over again. Like, here's what's going to happen, but I'm still here. Like, I'm still with you. And I don't know, for me, like communion's taken on a similar significance where for me, it's always been about the theology. It's been about like, here's what it's about and here's what I'm supposed to remember. And it's become more deeply meaningful in the same way that a lot of my faith has become more deeply meaningful, because on the other end of all of the theology and all that stuff is Jesus sitting there across the table from me and inviting me to be with him, and not just be with him, but know that like he's like the meaning and the significance that we're all looking for. So yeah. Cool.
It's always funny how topics that I don't think we're going to talk about for a while are going to be kind of like a stretch to get through, or like end up being my favorite discussions we've ever had.
Yeah. It's never clear from like, oh, like communion, like immediately, like us talking about it, it's the same reaction as when the bread and cup is in front of you. It's like, well, all right.
Yeah.
Cool.
Whatever. Yeah.
But yeah, thanks everybody for listening, and thank you too for the discussion. It's good stuff. And we're now going to move into our email land segment. So here we go. Somewhere on an island west of the archipelago, several emails have gathered together to form a nation unto their own. And it was called Email Land. You've now entered Email Land. Let's look at what the email civilians of Email Land are up to today. I have one email this week, and it comes to us from Cody.
This is my favorite question we've ever been asked.
It's really good.
It's a good one.
Cody is king of the listeners.
Somebody in your family has been kidnapped. You have to rank order the following fictional characters in order from the most to the least desirable in terms of rescuing your kidnapped family member. Number 1, Denzel Washington's character from Man on Fire, or The Equalizer, basically the same character. Liam Neeson's character from Taken. Keanu Reeves' character from John Wick. Sylvester Stallone's character from Rambo Last Blood. Predator from Predator.
Can I just like frame how I think we should talk about this list and how we should rank them? So the goal ultimately is to have our kidnapped family member return.
Right.
So how we should rank these is who is going to do the best job? Who has the best resume in terms of getting the people back that they are out to find? So
the rescued party will not fall in love with the rescuer, right? Because I feel like that's an important point.
It depends on family member relationship. If it's your wife, obviously.
Right, but I think we need to set that. We need to set who's being rescued, and also to make the caveat that you just said that the rescuer is not going to kill the rescuee on accident.
Yes.
So not fall in love and not kill. Like, we've hired somebody to go take somebody that we care about and bring them back to us. And preferably, I would argue, not fall in love.
Absolutely. So I think given those presuppositions, I think This might sound crazy. I think John Wick might be near the bottom of the list.
Oh,
so
I hard
let me
disagree.
explain.
Hard disagree.
Let me explain. Let me explain. So how does the first movie start? They kill his dog.
Yeah.
He didn't save the dog. That's a bad start. So I think
his wife had just died.
Oh.
I could have made a joke there, but I'm not going to. So I think that drops him way down. If this was revenge, if this was your family member has been killed and you need someone to take revenge, John Wick pretty high up the list.
I guess I get it. I guess I get it.
That's
the purpose.
That's my argument on that. Yeah.
Have we seen him rescue someone? That's a good point. I hadn't thought of that point. I haven't
don't know.
I haven't seen the third one yet.
I've seen the third one. I didn't see any rescuing. Going on.
Very little.
That's a great point. We don't know if he can bring people back.
We don't know that's his skill set.
Yeah.
It's not what he does.
So that goes into Predator with me too, because I don't trust Predator to not kill my loved ones.
But
there's no way. So they won't fall in love though. That's the main thing.
That's true. Which probably
that's a big
puts
plus for them.
Keanu Reeves below Predator.
Yeah. Also, there is a scene in the second Predator film where the Predator sees a pregnant woman and does not kill that pregnant woman. So I think that showing of some humanity, although it's literally not a human, so it can't have humanity, places it just above John Wick. So I think
that's John Wick.
I think John Wick's at the bottom, and I think
agree.
Then you have the Predator.
That's a solid argument.
And this is where I think we get into some very good discussion.
Okay.
So that leaves us Taken, Rambo, Denzel Washington.
So no, not just Rambo though. Rambo Last Blood, which I think is an important thing because
that's a good
to
distinction.
be fair, I have not seen Rambo Last Blood.
Nor have I.
Me neither.
But based off the previews, it looks like the bad guys come to him in a more twisted Home Alone scenario.
Yeah,
right?
That's right. What rescuing is he even doing?
Yeah, would he even get credit if, like, the scenario that has to work out for Rambo is that the bad guys who have taken your family member have to then come after Rambo for him to save them? That's a minus.
So a couple things. One, I would just like to pause this discussion and point out that Sylvester Stallone makes one Oscar-worthy movie and then turns it into a franchise that just turns completely. Right, like the first Rocky movie has nothing to do with the other Rocky movies. The first Rambo movie.
First Blood's one of my favorite movies.
It's a great movie about like PTSD and like what we do to veterans when they return home. Fast forward to Rambo 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and it's just like, what are we doing? So my thought is like it should go John Wick because we've never seen him rescue. He might fall in love with them and he'll just murder everybody.
Oh, for sure.
He goes Predator.
Yep.
Because at least you're not going to fall in love with him.
You're not going to fall in love with Predator.
Yeah.
He's probably going to kill you, but there's less likely. And then I think it should go, next, Sylvester Stallone, Last Blood, because he's old.
Yeah. Agreed.
And according, again, we haven't seen the movie, but it seems like they come to him. Yes. And so unless the kidnappers are bringing the kidnappee to Sylvester Stallone, he's useless.
Yeah. And I think important caveat here. So in the second Rambo film, Rambo does go to Vietnam and rescue the PODs, which I guess is like a conspiracy theory. There's a bunch of PODs POWs, excuse me, in Vietnam. There weren't after the fact really, but sidebar. So he does go save all of them. However, that's been about 40 years. Since he's last saved a large group of people.
Well, he does it in the later movies. I think doesn't he save like some missionaries or I don't know.
A lot of them die.
Yep. So again, and he's old. He's like 80 at this point.
Yes, he's very old.
So then we get to Liam Neeson
and Denzel
Washington.
Yeah.
Both have shown that they can save.
Yes.
Both have shown that you can fall in love with them easily.
That's very true.
Yes. So
very true.
This becomes
the tough
issue.
One.
Yeah.
And okay, so let's start off with this conversation. Who do we think would save them between Denzel Washington and Liam Neeson more? Because
who'd be more willing?
I know who would do a better job. I elevate Denzel in that. I think Denzel would save them better. However, I then have concerns about them falling in love with Denzel.
Oh yeah,
and
much
just
more.
running
Much
away
more
with
than Liam
Denzel.
Neeson. Yeah,
I think we
Absolutely.
also have to consider personal investment. Liam Neeson, I feel like, just goes into it because it's just his family.
Yeah.
Like, would
He's
he
a
actually
very
do that for
selfish
your
savior.
family? Would you do that? Would he do that for your family?
That's a good
I
point.
feel like
I don't know.
Denzel probably would.
Probably
At least
would.
based on the Equalizer.
Right.
Yeah.
It seems like it
Dakota-
makes sense. He seems like a more
But that
compassionate
makes it-
person.
Yeah.
But that makes it more complicated because, right, we trust Denzel to save. We trust Denzel to want to save.
Mhm.
But then we got a negative Denzel because we'll fall in love with Denzel. If Denzel brought my loved one back to me, I might fall in love with Denzel. And then that becomes even more of a problem because we're all in love with Denzel.
Why do you think you wouldn't be happy with Denzel?
No, I think I would be happy with Denzel. That's not the question.
No, like I mean in love. In love's what I mean.
Okay.
He'd make you happy.
Yeah. Like, dude, if I could chill with Denzel and just like drink coffee and talk with him all day, obviously that sounds wonderful.
Yeah.
However, like if my loved one saw me and Denzel next to each other and compared, I'm losing that 10 out of 10.
I just don't think Liam Neeson would do it for my family. Like, he just wouldn't do it. Like, he went through it for his family because they're people he like cares about. But like, just Denzel like seems like very like, at least in The Equalizer. I haven't seen Man on Fire in years. But he just seems like a more compassionate, I'm going to do this for other people kind of person. You know what I mean?
So the question is, do you want your family member back for sure? Because that's Denzel. Or do you want your family member in love with another, well, not in love with another person? Because that's Liam. Like, Liam might get him back for you, and they're not going to fall in love with him. But there's some doubt there. Denzel, they're going to fall in love with him, or you're going to fall in love with him.
If anyone in my family falls in love with Denzel Washington, I'd be fine.
That's a good point. I didn't think about that.
I'd be fine.
Yeah,
Just
and
saying.
so there's another point. So in the next couple of Taken movies, spoiler alert, his ex-wife actually dies.
That's true.
That's true.
So, but we have to be clear here. We have said Rambo Last Blood is the specific Rambo movie that we are looking at. And although we can still extrapolate and say he hasn't really saved anybody in about 40 years, blah, 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 this says Liam Neeson's character from Taken, not the Taken franchise.
That's true.
He is one for one in the Taken film. So,
That's true.
And there's one last concern I have. So correct me if I'm wrong. Like Aaron, I haven't seen Man on Fire in a really long time. Does Denzel Washington die?
In Man on Fire, he does.
Yes.
In Equalizer, he does not because there's a second one.
It's an important distinction.
Yeah.
Yes. Yep.
Which
So-
means,
so-
will he save
If we're going,
your
I
loved
think-
one and then die? Because then that solves the problem. of
That's
choosing
true.
that's
Denzel.
true.
That's-
Oh my gosh.
He wins, right?
I think he wins.
Yeah.
Like let's go with Man on Fire, Denzel.
Yeah.
Saving people. I think
Yes.
that's pretty good.
Yeah.
And then taking Liam Neeson number 2.
Side note, I have never seen Man on Fire. Does he die by being set on fire? Because that's just insensitive in the title.
No, I definitely
think
don't
so.
think that's
Okay.
I don't
Yeah.
think that's how that worked. I think there was a shootout and the little girl he's been protecting for the whole movie gets away.
But he dies.
Maybe dies.
Is
Once
there like
again,
a car on fire in
Yeah.
that movie?
Because
or
for
am I
some-
thinking of something else?
Exactly.
something is on fire.
I'm sure some kind of car is on fire sometime.
I thought in my head, because I saw it when I was like little and I don't remember it all, but I thought that he died in a flaming car, which then just would have been insensitive.
Yeah. It seems too on the nose with the title.
Literally a man on fire.
That's very true.
Yeah. 89 on Rotten Tomatoes, by the way.
Nice. Good to know. All
Oh,
right.
yeah. Denzel, Liam Neeson, Sylvester Stallone, The Predator,
Keanu Reeves.
Keanu Reeves is the list.
That's a good. We can all get behind that list.
Yeah.
That's what I'm impressed by. All right, that was email land, everybody. Now I'm gonna pass it. Wait, John,
Yes.
are we
I got
getting
one.
another email from
We
our Twitter?
just received an email. It is very important that we get to. It is from Jan Levinston Gould from Scranton, Pennsylvania. Actually, she dropped the Gould at some point. I don't know why it popped up on my computer. But she wants to know. She didn't ask for Twitter She didn't ask for Twitter followers. She said she saw a Twitter thread and was curious if we commented on the Twitter thread. The Twitter thread was describe your favorite Bible stories in the most boring of ways. And she said this topic of describing your favorite Bible stories in the most boring way possible seemed like it would be up our alley. And so she was curious if we had commented and added to this discussion. So I will kick it to Sage, our Twitter liaison, to see if he did. Sage, did you drop the ball or did you add to this discussion?
Indeed, I did add to the discussion. Also, sidebar, Jan, I am very excited to come to your dinner party this Thursday night. So the original tweet was from a J Ray at Josh Carlos Josh. So I had seen a few people tweet funny responses to this. So as John said, the tweet is describe your favorite Bible story as boring as possible. So I decided that I would like to jump in. So we ended up doing 3. First, Elijah hangs out with his apprentice, then leaves.
That's a good one.
Next up, John has a dream.
Some of this only we are gonna laugh at.
Yeah, you got to be a very Bible nerd to understand that.
Yes, absolutely. That's probably why I didn't really get any traffic with these, because I think they're hilarious, and I thought this would be the target audience. Apparently, I was wrong.
It's so good.
Yeah. So we have one more. Rain.
You talking Elisha there?
Flood.
We're going
Flood.
with flood.
Okay.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
It could apply to a lot of different things.
It could. And no one got any of them, apparently, from the looks of it.
Rain.
Oh, man. That was our
Good.
Twitter update. How many followers do we have, Sage?
We are holding strong at 79.
79. Oh my
Don't want to
gosh.
get too cocky. Don't want to get 80.
That's
No.
right.
In fact, if you
Stay
could
humble.
leave on Twitter, that would help our ego.
Let's not. I don't know. I don't know if I want to go that far.
Oh my gosh. All right. Well, fantastic. Thanks for listening to Email Land. If you have something you would like to write into Email Land, please use our contact form on our website to send us an email at bitesizetheology.com/contact. That is bitesizetheology.com/contact. We want to hear from you. You can send us something that has to do with this discussion. You can have something that has to do with another discussion. You could send us something that has nothing to do with a discussion. In fact, something that only you've thought of that's very innovative and you would like to have read on the Email Land segment. Please feel free to write us at bitesizetheology.com/contact, and we will read your Email Land question live in the Email Land segment. And you can mark that as anonymous if you'd like, and we will keep it anonymous for you. All right. Thank you all for listening out there. We are at Bite Theology on Twitter. We are Bite Size Theology on Instagram, all one word. We are Bite Size Theology, three separate distinct words on Facebook. And we're not on LinkedIn, so we'll never get a job. For now. I'm going to go ahead and pass our last word over to John, and he's going to close us on out.
Yeah, as we talk about communion, I think it's important to just reiterate that we're all invited to the table. There is some theological disagreement on that, but I think that theological disagreement is misinformed, because if you want to go be present with Christ, that is literally why Jesus died for you, right? To bring us back into relationship with God. And so know that no matter who you are invited to the table, and that Jesus' body was broken for you, that his blood was shed for you, so that we might know him and be with him and be made whole again, be invited back to the table, be invited back into the garden. And so, yeah, that's what communion is. And if you don't fully understand it, hey, join the club. I'm right there with you, and if it's something that means a lot to you, good. Don't let anybody take that away from you. Too often we complicate the sacraments. Too often we complicate the life of Jesus. But when it's simply put, he's inviting you to be with him. So be with him.
There you go. Thanks everybody for listening. Hope you have a good rest of your week, and we'll catch you on the next one.